I think every single one of my songs has like some sort of chord that sounds nearly wrong, and then you move one note and it resolves, and it's just like, it's like a breath of fresh air. It's like the best feeling in the world. It's like just, it's cathartic, you know? It's like it relaxes you. And I think that's what love feels like, right? It feels like tension and release. That release is like that good feeling.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Massey Hall tonight.
Yeah, I'm so excited.
Is that meaningful to you?
Yeah, I mean, so many legends have played there. It's really, really special to get to step on stage where I know my favorite artists have been before.
I mean, Massey Hall, and then I think you're on your way to Radio City Music Hall for a couple of nights?
Yeah, I am. And then Royal Albert Hall in London.
It wasn't that long ago that you weren't doing any kind of rooms like this, right?
No, not at all. I mean, I played the Velvet Underground in 2022. So it definitely feels like a huge, huge step, but I feel so honored. I never ever thought that making the kind of music I make, I would get to this level. So it really means a lot.
What was it? Was it the goal?
I don't know what the goal was. I guess so. My goal was just to kind of spread my joy and love for this kind of music with as many people as possible. But I really didn't have many modern examples of it being possible. So I didn't allow myself to think that big, I think.
My understanding, it's classical music at the beginning for you and your sister, right?
Yeah.
Piano and cello.
Mm-hmm.
Were you gifted at the cello?
Gifted. I don't know. I think it did come very naturally to me. I definitely practiced less than most people. Definitely according to my mother and cello teacher, I practiced less than most. But I definitely loved it. And my mom could tell I had like a knack for it and, made sure I saw it through and really did my scales and whatnot.
Did you like it?
I loved it.
Did you like classical music?
I loved it. And I loved it more and more as I grew older. I think when I was, I started playing when I was 4. So it was definitely something that was almost like a extra class in school. You come back from school, you've had your math class, you had your English class, you had your Icelandic class in Iceland, and then there's an hour of music. This was just my kind of daily routine. And then as I grew older and older, and as I became a teenager, I really started to appreciate it and love it for what it was, and something that was my own as well.
I hear you. It starts off as a lesson. It starts off as a thing you have to do to sort of satisfy a requirement. But as you get older, which tends to happen, not getting older, that does also tend to happen. But as you get older, you start to appreciate this music for its aesthetic purposes, or you start to actually like it.
I started to like it, I think, when I started playing chamber music. I went to pre-conservatory. So I was like around other kids who were doing the same. And it became a social thing as well, going to orchestra and meeting all my friends and playing this amazing repertoire that's existed for, centuries. I think that really changed it for me. And then I started singing as well. And I think I just grew a love for music that was really something that came from my own willingness and love rather than something that felt like a task or a class at school.
It's a little different than other people who have musicians as parents. Your mom's a violinist, is that right?
Yeah.
And your grandparents are
professors of classical music as well.
What's their specialty?
My grandfather, who passed a couple of years ago, he was like the head of the string department at the Central Conservatory in Beijing, but he was a violinist. And my grandmother is a piano professor.
And what eras did they specialize in? Were they into the
Western classical music?
Interesting.
So anything from like the 16, 17, 18, early 1900s.
And did you go to visit them and play music with them or hear them play music?
Every summer I went to China and spent a couple of months there and just practiced and took lessons and really just focused on it. That was my classical music camp.
What do you remember about that?
I remember just a lot of joy. I'd play a lot with my grandparents. Like we'd play together and we'd sing together and then we'd like have a big feast afterwards and eat and then a lot of my grandparents' students would come over and play for us or I'd just sit and listen while my grandparents were teaching. So it was just a lot and a lot and a lot of music.
When you say you started singing, what do you mean you started singing? You started singing in professionally or?
Yeah, I mean, I always sang, like, as a classical music student, you just always sing, but I
Like
started...
opera, like you were singing opera pieces? Or you
No,
were singing...
never opera. I immediately started singing jazz standards when I was 12 or 13. I don't know why I, like, didn't start singing until then, seriously. But when I was 12 or 13, I started singing, and I immediately just started singing Ella Fitzgerald songs. And because my dad loved Ella Fitzgerald. He loved jazz music and loved like Brazilian music. And so he'd play a lot of that in the house. And I think I always had like a very low voice, even when I was young. And I immediately resonated with those singers. So I just kind of copied them.
My next question was, did you have that voice that you have now even back then? Because it's a characteristic voice.
Yeah, I did. I mean, I remember when I was 13, when I was doing like singing competitions, and people were always remarking on the fact that I sounded so old. Like I sounded like a woman at the age of 13 or 12, and which made me feel kind of weird. I remember feeling a little bit like a circus animal. I feel like it's evened out now, but I definitely always had a very specific way or style of singing that definitely felt like it was something from an older time.
The feeling of feeling like a bit of a circus animal seems to come up in your story a lot, and also in your music. I was really struck by the Letter to My 13-Year-Old Self song on the record, and I thought it was a beautiful song.
Thank you.
It strikes me that not just because of your voice, maybe you didn't feel like you necessarily fit in.
No, not at all. I mean, Iceland is a very homogenous place. It's beautiful. It's very safe, and I love it so much. But I definitely felt very odd as a kid there, being, you know, half Chinese, and I grew up partially in the States, as you can hear from my accent. So I felt very foreign, and I had an identical twin. I was very expressive. I felt very loud, and I didn't feel very cool. And yeah, that definitely is a huge part of my story. And yeah, I think little Laufey could have never imagined what would happen. So I wanted to write a song kind of to give her a little hug.
Can I ask you what you might remember about that feeling of not fitting in? I think it's like a really nice story that we kind of, but I actually remember what it actually felt like, which was nights alone, sitting at my parents' computer,
Yeah.
you know, reading stuff online.
It was, I mean, yeah, I read a lot. I didn't read in Icelandic. I remember I had this big dream of like leaving Iceland because of it. I read so much like Harry Potter and Hunger Games and like a lot of kind of like young, like almost like these fantasy books, almost like as an escape, I think. And then music was my escape as well. But I think it just felt very, I just felt really different.
Yeah.
And it was, the thing is, like, I was very open and I had friends, but I just, at the end of the day, it felt like people returned to each other and I left the bubble. You know, like after school, people continued going together to football practice or going to, you know, having play dates after school. And I felt like I completely left that world after I left school. Like I went into my own world where I was playing like Bach. So it definitely felt odd, but it's really made me who I am today. So
It tends to do that, hey?
yeah.
And I remember that. I remember this feeling of like, I remember someone talking to me about Tom Petty one time. You familiar with Tom Petty?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember someone talking to me about Tom Petty one time, and they were like, "Oh yeah, Tom Petty. Everyone likes him, but he's nobody's favorite."
Yeah.
And I felt like that was my social life in high school.
Yeah, like that's the thing. I was so open and I had friends.
Yeah.
Like it didn't, but I always felt like people were kind of making fun of me a little
Yeah.
bit. Like they always knew I was a little bit different, and younger kids, you know, who don't know any better, you know, would come up to me and be like, "Where are you from?" Like they'd always ask, "Where are you from?" Because like even being half Chinese, I looked so different from the rest of the Icelanders. I remember answering like, "Oh no, I'm Icelandic." And they'd be like, "No, but where are you like actually from?"
Yeah,
like,
yeah, fair enough.
because you like, and I was like, how did they gather that evidence? Like, it's very funny, and I also didn't. I feel like it didn't allow me to it didn't allow me to connect with my Asian side either. Like I feel like the first time I got to connect with my Asian side was after I moved to the States.
How?
I think there wasn't a community for it in Iceland. There wasn't like, there were no other people I could talk about that to. I felt different. I didn't feel like I was like Asian necessarily. I just felt different. Whereas like now in the States, I get to kind of connect with that part of myself. And and connect with others who experience that as well.
Do you live in the States now?
I do. I live in Los Angeles.
Because you moved to Boston.
I did,
to go to the Berklee College of Music, a very prestigious, hard to get into music school. Well, you know, I know some folks. I have a couple of friends who've gone there. You know, it's not the easiest thing to get into there as a musician.
It's definitely a remarkable place. You have, I came from such a strict classical music world.
Well, here's my question. That is not Juilliard.
No,
that is not the New England Conservatory down the street. You're coming from professors and of violin and classical violinists and rules.
Exactly.
And you're going to the psychedelic tie-dye shirt of music schools.
Exactly. And I felt so lost because I was so used to rules. Like rules were my whole life. That's how I got by in life. That's how I made sure nothing went wrong, both musically and as a person. And going to Berklee kind of pushed me out of that box, both musically and as a person, which I think was integral to my growth as an artist and the reason I am, you know, the musician that I am today. But it was definitely so scary. I mean, I was playing in jazz I was a cello principal. So I was playing in jazz combos as like a cellist, and I was sitting there just like, oh my God, improvise. Definitely very different.
You went to Berklee as a cellist? Mm-hmm. I figured you went as a vocalist.
No.
And even the cellists that go to Berklee don't play your style. They typically play that choppy Natalie
very
Haas.
Choppy. Exactly.
We're getting nerdy about the cello here, by the way.
Yeah.
Rochetta Eggleston, Natalie Haas, Shuka Chaka, Berklee cello.
All Berklee people, yeah.
You didn't think I could talk about Berklee cello, did you, Mitch?
That is such a specific topic.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
But yeah,
not the style you were playing.
No, I mean, I learned it, which was so good for me. And I had my professor there, Mike Block. He kind of taught both, you know. So it was actually really great, and it really opened me up. And the way that I actually started this whole career was I was posting videos of myself singing jazz standards and accompanying on cello, which I wouldn't be able to do if I hadn't, like, you know, learned to break out of that box.
I got rhythm. I was trying to
literally. I mean, I haven't chopped in a while, but
it's a real. I should say for people listening, Berklee cello is a real thing.
Berklee cello technique is like it's maybe one of the few schools that teaches like contemporary cello technique.
Yeah, and it sounds badass. It does sound cool.
It's so cool. Yeah, it's so cool and really allows the instrument to play and participate in a lot more genres than just classical.
So what were the standards you were singing while playing cello?
Just songs from the Great American Songbook.
Like what?
Oh my God, It Could Happen to You.
Big tune.
Sunny Side of the Street. I did. Ooh. What else do I do?
I love that.
So many songs. Like
I love if I never had a cent, I'd be rich as Rockefeller. Isn't that the line? Yeah. Good line.
Great line. It's so fun to sing live as well.
So you have this.
Really roll the feller.
So you have this. You start posting videos on TikTok of you, or online of you doing standards and playing the cello. Mm-hmm. But it's when the pandemic hits. I guess everything shut down. You stay in Boston?
No. So I went back home. I had not really posted anything on social media. It was just like my personal social media page. But my parents were actually living in Washington, D.C. at the time. Oh. They moved there the year I moved to college.
That's handy.
Very handy. Mm-hmm. Perfectly handy. So I didn't leave the States, but I left Boston. I went to Washington, D.C. And I just was stuck in my bedroom and decided to write as much as possible and record as much as possible.
Yeah, D.C. during the pandemic's a little scary.
Oh my God. I mean, I was there for everything.
Yeah, what was
all
that like?
The lockdowns and all the
protests and
protests and all the curfews because of the protests. Mm-hmm. And yeah.
You were in your bedroom playing the cello and singing songs.
Yeah.
So you upload the song Valentine that you wrote. Valentine?
It was the journey was more like I was posting videos of like a mix of stuff. Valentine came like a year after I started, actually. Okay. But I think the first song I put out was called Street by Street. It was the only song I'd recorded at school just for fun. And after I'd grown a little bit of a social media following, like a week or two into the pandemic, I put it out.
Why were you posting stuff online? Were you hoping to get discovered? Were you hoping to get noticed?
No, it was more of a practice for me, I think. I was just keeping myself accountable to stay inspired and keep practicing and keep writing as well. I'd like do a song that I wrote and then a standard and a song that I wrote and a standard, like a flip-flop every day. But the first video I posted, one of the very first ones, was a cover of It Could Happen to You, and I was playing cello and singing. It went viral on Instagram.
What tell me what that means. I know what it means, but sorry, I'm not that old.
It's a jazz Instagram, like a big jazz page.
Okay.
Posted it, like reposted it.
Yeah.
And tagged me, and I got like 10,000 followers in 1 week. And then I had a group of people who were listening, and I just kind of kept going because I was like, oh, like they're listening and they're watching. I may as well.
So why do I think Valentine is the linchpin here? Why do I think Valentine is the one that got...
I mean, I didn't start TikTok until a couple of months later. Valentine was probably one of the bigger TikTok moments. That was like one of the first viral TikTok moments, if you will.
And how did that feel to have that song kind of blow up?
I mean, I wrote a verse of that on Valentine's Day almost as a joke. So, I mean, it was really cool. I definitely, the song resembles an old standard in every way. Like, especially when I wrote it, it had nothing but that kind of vibe to it.
Can you speak? I mean, I would ask you to sing it, but I don't want you to sing if you're singing tonight. Can you speak some of that verse to me? Do you remember how it went?
Oh yeah, I've rejected affection for years and years. Now I have it, and damn it, it's kind of weird. It's very like musical theater writing, like kind of jazz standard lyrical writing. I wasn't in love. I did not have a Valentine, but I was like, what if I have a Valentine? Like that's what this would feel like. Because I hadn't ever had a Valentine. You
had never really had a Valentine or someone to love or someone to...
Exactly.
So you were writing these songs to sort of an imaginary someone.
Yeah. I'd like gone through limerence, if you will, if you've heard of that term.
That's
like,
the Irish.
Like
that's the Irish poem form, right?
It's like having like
limerick.
A crush.
That's right. Okay.
You
right.
know,
Yeah,
it's like having like a crush.
Yeah.
Where you think you're in love, but it's just a crush. But no, I'd never like been properly in love. So I just wrote songs about it to kind of manifest it.
Interesting that you were writing love songs without having been in love.
Yeah, you have to make stuff up.
Fair enough. Can we play the Rufus giving her the Grammy?
And the Grammy goes to Laufey.
That's Rufus Wainwright, Canada's own Rufus Wainwright, presenting you with the Grammy for Traditional Pop Vocal Album of the Year, beating Bruce Springsteen. Take me back to that moment.
I mean, I didn't think for a second that I was going to win it, honestly. I completely blocked it out of my mind. I really thought that I pretty much had already won by getting nominated. I remember just telling myself, like, at least for the rest of my life, I'll be a Grammy-nominated singer.
Especially since how many months before were you posting in your bedroom?
Just a couple of months before. It was all so recent. And it just felt, I'm so honored. Like I said, like I started on the internet, which is like kind of an unglamorous way to start, right? Though I had no choice during the pandemic, but to do that, couldn't play live or anything like that. But it's very, very validating. You know, I've never signed to a major label. I worked very hard with my team, but then they've really believed in me making this kind of music that, you know, nobody would have guessed 4 or 5 years ago would have made any rounds with this age of audience.
I want to talk about that, but before we get to that, did you get to talk to Bruce Springsteen and sort of brag to him that you beat him at the Grammys?
No, unfortunately, I didn't. I don't know if I'd brag to him. I'm sure he has a lot to brag about himself, but...
I think he should have came over and found you at the Grammys and said, hey, you know, congratulations for beating me.
Oh, my God.
Sour grapes. I want to listen to your record. Now we can listen to your record.
Don't you notice how I get quiet when there's no one else around? Me and you and awkward silence. Don't you dare look at me that way. I don't need reminders of how you don't feel the same. Oh,
From a Grammy-winning album, Bewitched, that is Laufey with From the Start. Tell me about that song.
From the Start. It's just a silly song I wrote. It's like a bossa nova Brazilian style song that I wrote in like 20 minutes almost as a joke. I thought it was kind of cheeky to write a song about being in love with someone who's in love with someone else. And I think we all kind of know that feeling of hearing someone that you kind of have a crush on express their, love for someone else. It's like this very sinking feeling. And I've never really heard a song about it. So, yeah, that was kind of it. And I wanted to record it in a very... I wanted to record it in the same way that a bossa nova song in like the 60s or the 70s would have been recorded. In that, there's no virtual instrument or any like modern help in that sense. I wanted every instrument to be played by a person.
Why?
Because real musicians deserve a chance to play. And it's so much more fun.
Yeah.
It sounds good. It sounds better. And the question is always like, how do I, instead of slapping a lo-fi filter on something to make it sound old or a vinyl crackle, how about we use the vintage mics? How about we use the techniques and rely on that instead?
Do you want your music to sound old?
Old? No, timeless, yeah.
What's the difference?
Old sounds like something from the past. Timeless is something that can stretch from the past to the future.
That's very much how I felt when sorry, I didn't mean to grill you there.
Oh my God. Gorilla way. I've gone through years of conservatory training. I'm very used to the grill.
I don't want you to feel like you're in the conservatory right
Oh
now.
yeah. No, my God. It's so fine. I'm used to it.
Okay, cool. Because the reason I ask those questions is because I find your music so interesting as someone who comes from older music myself. So I came up playing a lot of like old traditional Irish music.
Cool.
And a lot of old traditional Newfoundland music where I'm from, and a lot of traditional and old country music and bluegrass music. And then as I have sort of kept one foot in those scenes, I find that when people make music that is reminiscent of an era, oftentimes their references or the things they write about are sort of stuck in that era too. So you'll have people you'll have people who are on TikTok or people who have Netflix writing songs about like, oh, you're the bee in my bonnet, or
Yeah, I'm very, 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 very careful to not go into that world, because at the end of the day, I don't think I'm born in the wrong century at all. I want to live in the future. Like as a woman, like there's no other century I'd rather live in. I'm very much a modern girl. I like my modern comforts, but I love music of the past. But I like to say it's modern stories. Like this is my modern experience. It's maybe I reference older music, but it can get, I don't know if gimmicky is the right word, but it can get I don't want it to sound like I'm replicating something old. I just want to be inspired by it.
I don't want to feel like I'm replicating something old. I want to, like you like the heart or the...
Gotta take the good parts from it,
The chord progressions.
The chord progressions, the recording techniques, the sounds, the melodies, even the lyrical style. My writing style is, like the lyrical style is very reminiscent of like, I'm very inspired by like Cole Porter and George and Ira Gershwin and Irving Berlin. Like this era of lyrical writing, I think is so clever. I just use words that are more... I use the words that I use the vocabulary I actually use in daily talk instead of borrowing something from the 40s, because that's not authentic.
And is that intentional on your part?
I think it's just subconscious. It's just I write the way I talk.
Yeah. It's rarer than people listening to this might think, for people to write in older, like,
Yeah, I didn't really. I remember the first time I wrote a song kind of in like more of like a standard style. I realized that nobody really does it nowadays, unless it's like for like a throwback TV show or something like that. But there's no reason that people shouldn't listen to it. People are writing in like more of styles of like the 90s or the 70s, the 80s. Like those styles are all coming back. Why not throw it back a little bit further?
What keeps you in this style? What's interesting to you as a writer?
I don't know. I think probably I would say the harmony, like the tension and release of that specific style of music and in jazz standards is just so fun and interesting to me.
Can you give us an example?
I mean, I think every single one of my songs has like some sort of chord that sounds nearly wrong, and then you move one note and it resolves, and it's just like, it's like a breath of fresh air. It's like the best feeling in the world. It's like just, it's cathartic, you know? It's like, it relaxes you. And I think that's what love feels like, right? It feels like tension and release. That release is like that good feeling. So yeah, I think it's probably, if I find like the common denominator between all of my favorite music, whether it's like a Ravel like classical piano piece or a Mahler symphony or a Gershwin tune, it has that element of tension and release.
How do you feel about the way people talk about your music, that you bring jazz to Gen Z? Is that comfortable for you?
I mean, it's really hard to box me in as an artist.
Yeah.
Like, it's very hard to put my entire catalog into one genre, because I have some songs and I have recordings of jazz standards as well that I, really try to keep authentic as well. So those would definitely, I would say, fall under jazz, but then I have songs that are inspired by jazz, and I, take a chord progression that is very jazzy, if you will, but have more like modern lyrics or melody or production over it. So it's so hard to put it into one thing or another. Yeah. I would definitely hope that I act as some sort of gateway for young people to listen to jazz. I use my platform to talk about my favorite current and past jazz artists. I get lots of comments and messages from people saying that they started listening to Chet Baker or Miles Davis because they found it through my playlists, or my music kind of gave them that pathway to get there. And that's what I hope to do.
But that's just you communicating music that you love. That's just music. Like the distinction of like Laufey brings jazz to Gen Z. This is just my opinion. I just see this a lot. I see this a lot when younger artists sing older music, that there's a generation that wants to make them into like the kids are all right. Mm-hmm. The kids are all right, and she's going to take this classic timeless music and bring it into the next generation. As she's going to be some ambassador of the music that we love. But my feeling with your music is it's just really good. It's really good, and you know what I mean. But like, do you understand what I mean? Like, it's really good, and you really like it, and you really like the style. It doesn't feel like you're some sort of like flag bearer for the petticoat.
No, I mean, I definitely feel a duty just because I love this music so much, and I see how it feels. It alienates certain groups, especially classical music, really alienates certain groups. And I really want to remind Gen Z, especially, that it is something that is entirely theirs to listen to and entirely theirs to love. And they don't have to understand every intricate bit of it to enjoy the music. I think that's something I definitely think about. But other than that, I'm just making the music that feels most authentic to me.
And your audience is full of people who are your age. And it's
and I don't think they're walking in there thinking that they're, keeping a part of some sort of movement to keep a genre alive. I think they're just hopefully coming there for the community and enjoying the music and relating in some way.
I remember that feeling. I remember like when my band was touring, we kept on being called like, oh, these are the people. I come from this island in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and we have our own kind of style of music that very few people play. And it was like, oh, they're preserving the music for another generation. And I used to always say to people like, no, I'm not. I like it.
Right.
I like it, so I'm playing it because I like it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, I'm both, right? I'm like, I don't think too much about it because it's just the music that comes most naturally to me and what I've done my whole life. But then I do also, like when I play concerts with orchestras, for example, I stand there and I look out into my very young audience, and many of them are in a symphony hall for the first time in their life. And maybe they'll go next week and listen to a Beethoven symphony and discover a new type of music that they didn't know that they could love. And that's definitely something I think about and love. I mean, I'm playing Lollapalooza in Chicago this summer, and I'm playing with the Chicago Phil, and that's the first time an orchestra is playing at Lollapalooza. And that to me does feel kind of cool. Not even in some kind of like, I'm an ambassador of classical music or the orchestra in any way, just it's something new, and it's a sonic world that maybe Lollapalooza goers haven't gotten to discover and understand as something that is their own yet.
I hear it on your record too. I hear that there's not a lot of reverb on your voice.
No, I hate reverb. I have one song with reverb.
Why do you hate? Talk to me about hating reverb.
I don't hate reverb. That's the wrong way of putting it. I don't like how my voice sounds with reverb, aside from on my song Goddess. Then I wanted reverb because I wanted it to sound very cavernous. I wanted it to sound like I was in a big hall. I just like the very intimate sound of the dry voice. I like sounding like I'm inside someone's ear.
It is a more challenging thing as a singer to not be able to rely on that echoiness.
Yeah, I guess it's a part of it is me challenging myself to see how far I can go without the traditional helpers, you know? But I love that sound. I love that dry tone. I love feeling, I want people to put on a pair of headphones and feel like I'm in the room with them.
Where do you want your music to go from here?
It's a great question. I have no clue. To the ears of people who enjoy it, hopefully.
Where do you want your own music to evolve from here?
Like, oh, I see. I don't know. My one hope is that I don't let any kind of outside force stop me. Like, I kind of have just been letting my mind run wild in the past few years, and it's not held me back in any way. So I just hope that I can continue to kind of be inspired by my own thought rather than what's coming from the outside.
Rather than expectations of an audience.
Expectations of an audience, or fame or money or team members or anything like that. I really hope that, not that anyone's pushing me, but I really hope that I just listen to my own intuition.
I put on your record and I spend a lot of time listening to old music, and it's so refreshing to hear someone sing old music, but not in an old way, in a modern, normal, contemporary way. I really love it. And
thank you.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.